My youngest son called me at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. I know the exact time because I was still in my garage, bent over the engine of a 1968 Ford Mustang I'd been restoring for 8 months, and I remember looking at the clock on the wall when my phone buzzed on the workbench. I almost didn't answer. My hands were covered in grease, and late calls usually meant spam. But the name on the screen was Marcus, and Marcus never called late, not unless something was wrong. Dad. His voice was tight, controlled in a way that told me he was working hard to keep it that way. Listen to me carefully. Don't react. Just listen. I set down my wrench. I'm listening. I need you to do something tonight. Before you go to sleep, go through every drawer in your desk. Look for anything you don't recognize. Any documents, any papers you don't remember signing. Can you do that? Marcus, what's going on? I'll explain everything tomorrow. I promise. But tonight, I need you to look. And Dad, don't mention this to my brother. Not yet. He hung up before I could ask another question. I stood in my garage for a long moment, the Mustang half assembled in front of me. Oil rags piled on the floor, the smell of metal and gasoline thick in the air. Marcus was 34 years old. He worked as a forensic accountant for a firm in Dallas that specialized in financial fraud investigations. He was not a man who made dramatic late-night phone calls without reason. I went inside and started opening drawers. It took me 20 minutes to find it. Tucked inside a manila folder behind my old tax returns. A document I had never seen before in my life. My name was on it, my signature was on it, but I had never signed it. It was a quitclaim deed for my house. I sat down at my kitchen table and read it 3 times. According to this document, I had transferred ownership of my home, the house I had lived in for 31 years. The house where I raised my 2 sons after their mother passed. The house I had paid off completely in 2019 to my eldest son Raymond and his wife Cheryl. The transfer date listed was 6 weeks ago. I pressed my hands flat on the table and breathed. I had not signed this document. I had not been to any notary. I had not agreed to transfer anything. But there it was, in black and white, with what looked like my signature at the bottom. I called Marcus back. "You found something," he said. Not a question. "A quitclaim deed. Marcus, I never signed this." I heard him exhale slowly. "I know, Dad. I know you didn't. How long have you known about this?" A pause. 3 weeks. I needed to be sure before I said anything. I'm sorry I waited. I wanted to have everything documented first. "Tell me everything." He did. "It started," he said, 4 months ago, when he visited for my birthday and noticed something odd. Raymond had pulled him aside during the party and made a casual comment about eventually taking over the property maintenance on my house. Marcus hadn't thought much of it at the time. Raymond and Cheryl had been living with me for 8 months by then, supposedly saving money to buy their own place, and it seemed reasonable that Raymond might be thinking about property upkeep. But then Marcus started noticing other things. On a follow-up visit 2 months later, he saw new mail on my counter from a title company he didn't recognize. He saw Cheryl on the phone in the backyard, speaking quietly, turning away when she noticed him watching. He saw Raymond offer to drive me to my doctor's appointment and volunteer to handle the paperwork when the receptionist asked me to update my insurance forms. Small things. Individual, each one was explainable, but Marcus was a forensic accountant. He looked at patterns for a living, and the pattern he was seeing made his stomach drop. He started digging quietly. He checked the county property records online, and that's when he found the quitclaim deed filed 6 weeks ago, transferring my house to Raymond James Whitfield and Cheryl Ann Whitfield. "Dad," Marcus said, "I think they forged your signature, and I think this has been planned for a long time." I sat at my kitchen table for a very long time after we hung up. The house was quiet around me. Upstairs, Raymond and Cheryl were asleep. They had the master bedroom on the 2nd floor, had moved in there after I told them they could use it while I took the smaller room closer to the garage. I had offered that. I had thought I was being generous. I thought about the last 8 months. The way Cheryl had taken over managing the grocery budget, saying she wanted to help reduce my expenses. The way Raymond had started accompanying me to the bank, standing just close enough to watch me enter my PIN. The way they had gently suggested twice that maybe I should think about giving them power of attorney just in case something happened to me health-wise. I was 66 years old and had the blood pressure of a man 20 years younger, so both times I had laughed it off. I wasn't laughing now. The next morning, I drove to see my attorney before Raymond and Cheryl were awake. Her name was Gloria Hatch, and I had known her for 15 years. I brought the quitclaim deed with me. She put on her reading glasses and studied it for a long time without speaking. "Edward," she said finally, "did you sign this?" "No." "Were you present at any notarization?" "No." "Do you recognize this notary stamp?" I looked. The stamp was from a notary public in a town 40 miles away. I had never been to that town in my life. "No," I said. Gloria set the document down. "Then this is deed fraud. This is a felony." She looked at me over her glasses. "I need you to tell me everything." I told her everything. The 8 months of Raymond and Cheryl living in my house. The small things Marcus had noticed. The power of attorney suggestions. The title company mail. When I finished, Gloria folded her hands on her desk. "Here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to have a handwriting expert examine this signature. Second, we're going to subpoena the notary's records. If they actually notarize this, without you present, they committed a crime too. Third, and I want you to listen carefully, Edward, you need to act completely normal at home. Don't confront them. Don't let on that you know anything. Can you do that?" I thought about sitting across the breakfast table from my eldest son, making small talk, while knowing what I knew. "I spent 22 years as a high school football coach," I said. "I can keep a poker face." She almost smiled. "Good. I'll be in touch within 48 hours. I drove home. Raymond was eating cereal at the kitchen counter when I walked in. He was 41 years old, broad-shouldered, with my same dark eyes, though his hair had started going gray at the temples. He looked up and smiled. "Morning, Dad. Where'd you go so early?" "Hardware store," I said. "Needed a part for the Mustang." He nodded, already looking back at his phone. "Right on." I poured myself a cup of coffee and stood at the window, looking out at my yard. My yard, 31 years of mowing that grass, trimming those hedges, planting those oak trees that were now taller than the house. And according to a fraudulent document filed 6 weeks ago, none of it belonged to me anymore. I drank my coffee and said nothing. The next 3 weeks were the longest of my life. Marcus drove up from Dallas on the weekend under the pretense of visiting. We sat in my garage with the door down, speaking quietly while I worked on the Mustang. He had hired a private document examiner on his own, paid for out of his own pocket without telling me, and the results were unambiguous. The signature on the quitclaim deed was not mine. It had been carefully traced, probably from my signature on a bank document or insurance form. But under magnification, the pen pressure patterns were wrong. The natural hesitations of handwriting were absent. It was a forgery. "Marcus," I said, "do you know how long this has been planned?" He was quiet for a moment. He picked up a socket wrench, turned it over in his hands. "I found some things, Dad. When I was looking into the property records, I found another filing. From 14 months ago." He looked at me. "They tried to do this once before. Filed a similar deed, and then withdrew it 2 weeks later. I think they got nervous and pulled back. 14 months ago. Raymond and Cheryl had been living with me for 8 months now, but they had been planning this for over a year before they even moved in. I set down the part I was holding. They came here specifically to do this. I think so. I think moving in was part of the plan. Getting access to your documents, establishing themselves as your caretakers, at least on paper. I thought about Cheryl reorganizing my filing cabinet last spring. She had done it while I was watching a game, cheerfully calling out that she was just getting things organized. I had thanked her. "What do we do now?" I asked. "Gloria is filing a complaint with the district attorney's office this week. She's also filing a motion to void the fraudulent deed. The county recorder's office has been notified." He paused. "But Dad, we have a problem. The criminal process takes time. And right now, legally, because that deed is on file, even as contested, their attorney could argue they have an interest in this property. Which means we need to move carefully about how and when we confront them." Gloria said the same thing. She said, "Wait." She's right. I waited. 2 weeks later, Gloria called me into her office. She had the document examiner's full report, the notary's deposition. The notary, it turned out, had no record of ever meeting me, and their stamp had been replicated, and a letter from the district attorney's office confirming they were opening a criminal investigation into Raymond and Cheryl for deed fraud. "How did they get the notary stamp?" I asked. "They bought a notary embosser online," Gloria said flatly. "You can order them. Technically, it's illegal to use someone else's stamp, but the stamps themselves aren't controlled." The DA's investigator traced an online order to a credit card in Cheryl's name. I sat back in my chair. The planning of it. The deliberateness. They had ordered a fake stamp. They had practiced my signature. They had spent 14 months working toward this. There's something else, Gloria said. She slid a piece of paper across the desk. I pulled their financials as part of the discovery process. Raymond and Cheryl have significant debt. Credit cards, a personal loan, money owed to Cheryl's parents. Total debt is approximately $94,000. I looked at the number. My house was worth $430,000. They needed money. They saw my house, and they decided the simplest solution was to steal it. What happens now? I asked. Now, Gloria said, we confront them, with law enforcement present. The detective who knocked on my door the following Saturday morning was named Reyes. He was with the Financial Crimes Unit, quiet and professional, and he brought a colleague with him. Marcus had driven up the night before and slept in the garage guest room. He was standing beside me when I opened the door and called up the stairs. Raymond, Cheryl, can you come down? Someone's here to see you. I watched their faces as they came down the stairs and saw Detective Reyes. Cheryl stopped 3 steps from the bottom, one hand on the railing. Raymond's expression went through several things very quickly: confusion, then a flash of something that might have been calculation, then a careful blankness. Raymond Whitfield? Detective Reyes said. Yes. We'd like to speak with you and your wife about a deed filed with Tarrant County 6 weeks ago. You can speak with us here, or we can do this at the station. Raymond looked at me. I held his gaze and said nothing. We'll need to call our attorney, he said. That's your right, Reyes said. They sat in my living room with their phones and called a lawyer while I stood in my own kitchen and drank a glass of water and looked at the photographs on the refrigerator. Raymond at 15, holding a football. Raymond at 22, graduating college. A photo of the two of us at his wedding 12 years ago, when I had given a toast and cried and meant every word of it. 2 hours later, Raymond and Cheryl left with Detective Reyes to continue the conversation at the station. Marcus stood next to me on the front porch, and we watched the car pull away. You okay? He asked. Ask me later, I said. The investigation moved on its own schedule. Gloria navigated the legal process with the efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. The fraudulent deed was formally voided within 3 weeks of the criminal complaint being filed. My house was mine again on paper, as it had always been in reality. Raymond and Cheryl retained a criminal defense attorney. Cheryl's parents hired a civil attorney to try to recover money she owed them, which complicated everyone's situation considerably. I changed the locks. I packed Raymond and Cheryl's belongings while they were staying elsewhere during the investigation and left everything in the garage, neatly boxed, labeled, nothing damaged. I was not cruel about it. I just needed my house back. Marcus helped me carry the boxes to the garage. We worked without talking much, which was fine. There wasn't a lot to say. 3 months after that Saturday morning, Raymond called me, not from his usual number, from what I assumed was a borrowed phone, because I had stopped answering his calls. He left a voicemail. Dad, he said, I know you don't want to hear from me. I understand that. I need you to know that this wasn't my idea. Cheryl pushed this. She found the website where you could order the stamp. She traced the signature. I went along with it because we were in over our heads financially, and I convinced myself it wasn't really stealing because someday the house would be mine anyway. I know how that sounds. I know. He paused for a long time. I'm sorry, Dad, for whatever that's worth. I listened to the voicemail twice. Then I put my phone down on the workbench and went back to the Mustang. Was it Cheryl's idea? Maybe. Probably some of it was. But Raymond had ordered me a birthday cake the weekend before detectives knocked on his door and sat across the table from me and asked about my health and smiled. He had known. He had participated. Whatever degree of blame split between them was a matter for attorneys, not for me. Raymond and Cheryl were charged with deed fraud, forgery, and criminal impersonation of a notary. The DA's office also pursued a charge of elder financial abuse, given my age, which carried additional sentencing weight under state law. Their case moved through the system slowly, as these things do, with hearings and continuances and motions that Gloria tracked and summarized for me so I didn't have to attend most of them. I went back to working on the Mustang. 8 months is a long time to spend on an engine, but I wasn't in a hurry. The 1968 had a 390 cubic inch V8 that had been partially rebuilt by someone who didn't know what they were doing, and undoing bad work is always slower than starting from scratch. I worked on it in the evenings, radio on, garage door up when the weather was good, neighbors occasionally stopping to look. Old Harlan from 2 houses down would sometimes bring a lawn chair and sit nearby, watching and talking, which I appreciated more than I told him. "How's the legal business?" he asked one evening, not looking up from his coffee. "Moving," I said. "Raymond going to prison? That's up to the judge." Harlan was quiet for a moment. He was always a little slick, that boy, even when he was a kid. "Remember when he talked you into buying that riding mower you never needed?" I laughed despite myself. It was the first time I had laughed in what felt like a long time. Raymond ultimately pleaded guilty to 2 of the charges, in exchange for a reduced sentence. 18 months in county jail, 5 years probation, mandatory financial counseling, and restitution to cover my legal fees and court costs. Cheryl, whose fingerprints were on more of the physical evidence than notary embosser order, specific internet searches, received a slightly longer sentence. 22 months. Their marriage, as far as I could tell, did not survive the process. The civil matter, a separate lawsuit I filed for emotional distress and attempted financial exploitation, was settled quietly for an amount that helped cover the remainder of my legal costs and then some. Gloria was as good at negotiating as she was at everything else. Marcus drove up for the sentencing hearing. We sat in the courtroom together, and when it was done, we walked out into the October afternoon and stood on the courthouse steps for a moment, without speaking. "That's it," Marcus said. "That's it. How do you feel?" I thought about it honestly, like a man who just spent 14 months being robbed by his own son and then spent another year watching the legal system figure out what to do about it. I looked at him, relieved, not happy, just relieved. He nodded. He understood the difference. That evening, I finished the Mustang. Not entirely, there was still bodywork to do, and the interior needed reupholstering, and I hadn't decided on the final paint color yet. But the engine ran. I turned the key and it caught on the second try and settled into a deep, even idle that I could feel in my chest. I sat in the driver's seat with the garage door open, engine running, and just listened. 31 years in this house. My sons had grown up in the driveway I was looking at. I had taught Raymond to ride a bike in that driveway. He had broken his wrist falling off a skateboard in that driveway. I had backed the station wagon out of that driveway every morning for a decade, taking them to school. The memory didn't make me angry. It just made me tired in the way that grief makes you tired. A weight that is present and real, but that you eventually learn to carry without it stopping you. I turned the engine off, went inside, made dinner. In February, I received a letter. The return address was the county jail. Raymond's handwriting on the envelope, careful and deliberate the way it had been since he was learning to write. And I sat beside him at the kitchen table. I held it for a long time before I opened it. It was 2 pages. He had written about the specific moment he had agreed to go along with Cheryl's plan, a conversation they'd had in their car, in the parking lot of a Walmart, he said, when they were going over what they owed and calculating what the house was worth. He had written about the way he had told himself, it wasn't really wrong because I would die someday and leave it to him anyway, and this was just accelerating something inevitable. He wrote about how he understood now that this thinking was not only wrong, but revealed something about the way he had been valuing his own comfort over my life, my home, my dignity. He did not ask me to drop the lawsuit. He did not ask me to forgive him specifically. He said he hoped that someday, when enough time had passed, I might be willing to have a conversation. He said he would understand if I wasn't. He signed it. Your son, Raymond. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer, not the trash. A drawer. I'm not a man who makes decisions in a hurry. I spent 31 years coaching young men, and the thing you learn doing that is that people can change, and also that hoping someone will change is different from evidence that they have. One letter from jail wasn't evidence of anything except that Raymond was capable of writing a letter. I needed time, and I needed to see. And I wasn't willing to pretend otherwise for the sake of making myself feel like a more forgiving person. But I kept the letter. Marcus visited on a long weekend in March, and we worked on the Mustang together. He was not mechanically gifted, but he was patient, and he handed me tools without being asked, which is really all you need from a helper. We had the doors off and were working on the bodywork, filling old dents, sanding down rust. What color are you going to paint it? He asked. Original was Wimbledon white, I said. I'm thinking about keeping it white. Classic. Your mother always liked white cars, I said. Said they looked clean. He smiled. He didn't say anything, which was the right response. We worked until the light was gone, and then ordered pizza and ate it at the workbench, the way we used to, when he was a teenager, helping me work on his grandfather's old pickup truck. He was 34 years old, a forensic accountant who spent his days tracking other people's financial crimes, and he had driven 4 hours on a Friday afternoon because he thought I might want company on a Saturday. I did not take that for granted. Marcus, I said, yeah, thank you. For what you did, the looking into it. Before you told me, he was quiet for a moment. I didn't want to bring it to you until I was sure. I didn't want to put that in front of you and then have it be wrong. I know. I looked at my slice of pizza. You protected me before you told me. That's the right order. He shrugged like it was nothing. It wasn't nothing. The Mustang was painted in early April. Wimbledon white, same as it left the factory in 1968. The shop did good work, clean lines, no orange peel in the finish. I brought it home on a Wednesday and parked it in the garage and stood looking at it for a while. 66 years old. 31 years in this house. 22 years coaching football before my knees made standing on a sideline for 3 hours impractical. I had buried my wife 12 years ago, raised 2 sons, fixed up 3 cars completely and partially restored, 11 more. I had seen good things and hard things, and now I had seen a thing I had not expected to see, which was my own eldest son file forged documents to steal the house I lived in. And I was still standing in my garage, looking at a finished Mustang that sounded like a cathedral organ when you turned the key. There is a thing coaches say, a cliche that is also just true: you don't get to choose what happens to you, only what you do next. I had said it to boys who lost games and boys who lost parents, and boys who made mistakes they couldn't undo. I believed it when I said it to them. I still believed it now. What I did next was drive the Mustang to Marcus's house in Dallas for a weekend visit. Took the back roads, avoided the highway, let the engine open up on a long stretch of empty Texas 2-lane. The car ran beautifully. What I did next was start thinking about the next project. There was a 1972 Chevelle sitting in a yard 2 streets over, and the owner had mentioned more than once that he wasn't sure he'd ever get around to restoring it himself. I had his number somewhere. What I did next, on a morning 6 months after the sentencing, was sit down and write a short letter back to Raymond. Not forgiveness, I wasn't there yet, and pretending I was would have been a lie, and I was not willing to lie to him, even now. Just acknowledgement. I had received his letter. I was not closing the door permanently. There was nothing more to say at the moment, but I was not closing the door. I sealed the envelope and drove to the post office and mailed it on my way to get coffee. And when I got home, I went into the garage and started pulling parts for the Chevelle I hadn't even bought yet. Because that's how you start. You get the parts. You make the plan. You begin. Raymond would get out someday. Maybe there would be something left between us. Maybe not. I couldn't know that yet. What I knew was that I was still in my house, with my name on the deed, my tools on the pegboard, my cars in various states of assembly. Nobody had taken anything from me that I hadn't gotten back. Marcus had caught it in time. Gloria had fought it clean. And I had kept my head down and done what needed doing, which had always been my approach to everything difficult in my life. The clocks my wife used to keep in the living room were still there. She had collected them, old mantel clocks and anniversary clocks in glass domes, and I had kept everyone. They chimed at the hour and the half, a layered sound that I had lived with for so many years, that I stopped hearing it the way you stop hearing the refrigerator hum. But sometimes in the evening, when the garage was quiet and I was sitting with a cup of coffee, I heard them clearly. All those different clocks, different ages, different mechanisms, and somehow they all kept the same time. That seemed on balance like the right way to end up.